Now that all of you have come here, we have about 25 participants, which is wonderful to see all of you. Let me start with what we're going to do today. So today is all about transforming your temporary visas into permanent residency and how to go about it, right? So I've already given you an introduction. I'm Keith James. I'm an immigration lawyer. And my co-host is Panitha or Pan Perera, who is a career coach. So what are we going to cover today? Firstly, we're going to talk about pathways to permanent residency, all the various different pathways available towards permanent residency. Then I'm going to talk to you a bit about the migration strategy and all the various updates that the government has put in place. Then I'm going to talk about skill assessments and why these skill assessments are useful and why you should continue to pursue trying to obtain a skill assessment. And then I will hand over to my very capable co-host, Pan, who will go through why LinkedIn is more than just a digital resume. How do you optimize your LinkedIn profile? And what are the tips and tricks to land sponsorships for all of you? Lastly, we both have exciting limited time offers for you all for joining us on these webinars, and we will outline those to you in due course. So let's jump right into it. The migration strategy. What are the changes that the government has introduced? So there are a lot of proposed changes. I'm only going to talk about the actual changes that have been announced to date. The first change is that they're going to abolish the 485 extension. As all of you know, the subclass 485 is the graduate or post-study work visa you get for studying in Australia for at least 2 years. Now, last year around June, July, the government announced a list of select occupations where they were going to give you an additional 2 years on your 485. So if you had already done a bachelor's and had 2 years of post-study work visa, and if your course was on that list, you could have made another 485 application and gotten another 2 years. If you had done a master's and you had 3 years, you could have gotten 5 years. And if you'd done a PhD, you could have gotten up to 6 years. Unfortunately, the government has announced that they're going to close that, and therefore new applicants will not be receiving the extra 2 years on your 485 from around mid 2024. They haven't given us an exact date. So if you're currently on a 485 and your visa was only granted for 2 years initially, I would highly recommend you look into extending that or contact a lawyer that can assist you in looking into extending that. The second thing that I would like you to be aware of is the government is potentially going to reduce the 485 eligibility from 50 years to 35 years. This would be really concerning, particularly for those master's students or students that have done consecutive student visa applications without taking their 485 visas. So if you're in that boat, really look at your situation carefully. If you're going to tick over 35 years, just keep an eye out. That the rules haven't been announced yet, but this is something that we are very concerned about, because if you're at that age, you really can't take a risk, because if the government doesn't do anything about it, no problem. But if they bring in some restrictions on the age for the 485, you have to be very alert to that. The next thing is that the government is talking about preventing visa hopping, and they have actually implemented it in the student visa program already as at 23rd of March. That was this Saturday. I'll explain that in a minute. The government has also introduced this new genuine student test, which is a departure from their previous genuine temporary entrant test. Let's go through what these changes look like. Just so you guys know, these changes already came into effect on this Saturday. So from the 23rd of March onwards. So any student visas you launch from now onwards is subject to this test, and you really need to be on top of this test to know whether you will get your visa or not. The first thing that you should know is that the government is really looking to see whether you're a genuine student. Previously, they were only looking to see whether you are genuine temporary entrant. That is, whether you are coming to Australia to study and whether you will go back to your country. Now you don't need to do that anymore, but you must prove that you're coming to the country to genuinely study. What does that look like in theory? Firstly, they've increased the IELTS requirement from 5.5 overall to 6 each band. So if you don't have the best IELTS or PTE equivalent results, I would highly recommend you spend some time focusing on getting that score up to date. The second thing is the government is really going to clamp down on applicants that are going down a course. So if you have done your bachelor's, for example, Then if you've taken your subclass 485 post-study work visa, and now you've run out of time because you couldn't secure permanent residency for whatever reason, and you want to go back onto a trade course or diploma in leadership management, I would be very, very careful because the government may reject that visa. Also, if you're overseas and you're trying to apply for a trade course or just a diploma level course to come to Australia from overseas, it is quite likely that the government may reject that application, saying that you're not a genuine student. And if you want to undertake quality education at that level, you should be able to do that in your home country. So be very careful when you're transitioning from student visas to other visas of a lower level. There are also applicants that come into Australia to do a bachelor's degree, let's say a bachelor's of engineering. Once you're here, you realize that the course isn't something you enjoy, or you figure out that it's too expensive and you can't afford it. So you want to go and do maybe a certificate 3-4 in motor mechanism with a diploma in motor mechanism. And then because you are on a bachelor's visa, you have to apply for a new student visa. When you drop a course, it's quite likely that the government will reject that onshore application. So if you want to do that type of studies, you might have to study both courses parallelly, or you might have to change into another student visa, say like a arts degree or a management degree where the workload is much lower, where the fees are much lower, and do a trade course parallelly. So there are some strategies, but you have to be careful about how you pick those strategies. The last thing is the government has introduced a condition called 8534 and 8535. This is the biggest change that they made to the student visas as at the 23rd of March. If this condition is imposed on your student visa moving forward, this condition is called the no further stay condition. Some of you may be aware of this condition from visitor visas, where a lot of visitor visas come with the condition. So you can't come to Australia and make any further applications while you're in Australia. They are going to impose this condition on student visas as well moving forward. So if you get that condition, you really need to think about what type of visas can you make in Australia and what type of visas you need to go back to your home country and make. So if you're already on a 408, that's the COVID visa, that's commonly known as, or if you're on a 485 that is about to expire and you're thinking of applying for a student visa, really think about whether this condition will be imposed on your visa or not. Think about what strategies you would want to employ if they put that condition on your visa. Also, if you're studying, let's say you've already done 1 year of your bachelor's, but you no longer want to do that, now you want to change to another bachelor's, think about what will happen to you subsequently when you eventually have to apply for another student visa extension. They may impose this 8534 no further stay condition. So in my view, this is the most dangerous condition for applicants of student visas currently. So really be aware that you could actually have this condition imposed on your visa. So the impacts are, as I said, that the no further stay condition will be imposed on you. If you're trying to study courses at a lower level than the qualification you already have, you may face some difficulties. And the last one is, if you have been in Australia for, let's say, more than 5 years, you will be deemed as a high risk applicant, and the government may actually refuse your visa or put this no further stay condition on your visa. So you have to be very careful how you go about planning your journey to PR. And that's why I am presenting these things to you today. So these are the conditions that I just described very briefly. So basically, if you have the 8534 condition imposed on your student visa, you will only be able to make a 485 visa or a protection visa application. Not many of you would need to make a 590 visa, so we don't need to worry about that. If you have an 8535 condition imposed, you will only be able to apply for another student visa that is supported by the Commonwealth or a protection visa. So be very careful if you get these visas imposed, conditions imposed on your student visa. So to make this a little interactive, I was thinking that we could have a question for the audience. Could all of you put in the chat boxes, what are the types of visas that you hold? So we can get a little bit of a understanding of what are the type of visas that everyone is on at the moment. If you can just put it in the chat box, we can get a little bit of an understanding of what type of visas the audience is having. So let's talk about pathways to PR. This is what all of you are here for, I'm sure. So there are two broad pathways to permanent residency in Australia. One is called the skill migration pathway, and the other is called the employer sponsored pathway. The skill migration pathway is where you use your own skill, which is on the skilled occupation list, to gather 65 points, express an interest to migrate, and get invited to apply for permanent residency. But when it comes to the employer-sponsored visas, there are broadly 4 visas. The most common one is the 482, that's the employer-sponsored work visa, while you have the 186, which is the employer-sponsored permanent residency, and you have the 494, which is the employer-sponsored regional visa. There is one more mystery visa available, which I'll reveal to you in a minute. Let's quickly have a look at the chat and see what are the types of visas our audience is on. So a lot of you are on a 485. There is a few of you on a 500 and some of you on a 408 visa. Yes, I would say applicants who are on a 408 are probably at the highest risk at the moment, particularly because you have probably already obtained your 485 and that's run out and now you've applied for a 408. So most of you are probably been in the country for quite a while. So you might have crossed that 5-year threshold, which the department deems as a high risk. So you have to be very careful when you transition to your next visa. Let's look at what are the visas you can transition to. The first type of visa you can transition to is the employer-sponsored visa. The subclass 482 is the most popular. It's called the temporary activity sponsorship or the employer-sponsored. It's the employer-sponsored visa. For you to have this visa, you need at least 2 years of work experience in your nominated occupation. A trick about this visa is that 2 years of work experience can be obtained at any time in your working history after you turned 18. So before you studied your course, after you studied your course, or even during while you studied your course, you can obtain that 2 years of work experience to fulfill the requirement for the 482. In order to apply for a 482, you need to have a job in your nominated occupation or your field of skill assessment with 2 years of full-time work experience. Remember, full-time work experience, when it comes to the employer-sponsored visa, is defined as above 32 hours per week, typically 38 hours a week. If you have only 20 hours a week of work experience, then you will be considered as having part-time work experience. So be very careful when you calculate your 2 years of work experience. When it comes to the subclass 186, this is the employer-sponsored permanent residency, where if you get this visa, you are a permanent resident of Australia and you get it through your employer's sponsorship. The 494 is very similar to the 186. It is a permanent residency visa as well, but it's only available in the regional areas. And you can only get that, you will get that visa for a period of 5 years and you will get PR after living and working regionally for 3 years. So another quick question for the audience. Are any of you employed in the field where you have directly studied in? So for example, if you studied commercial cookery, are you currently working as a chef? If you've studied engineering, are you working as an engineer? Can any of you just tell us what you studied and what occupation you're currently working in? That might help us. Yes or no is a little hard for me to give any insight or any guidance. So if you are working in your nominated occupation, just tell me what course you studied and what nominated occupation you're currently working in. So this is the 482. As I said, 482 requires 2 years of full-time work experience. It requires full-time is defined as 38 hours per week, but up to 32 hours a week is accepted. And you need at least 5.0 each band of IELTS. The main thing that you need to remember when it comes to the 482 is there is a minimum salary threshold of $70,000. So for example, if you're working as a chef or a hospitality manager, your employer might say, look, I'm only willing to pay you $65,000. You can't use this visa stream. That is something that's very important to think about. So the 494, as I said earlier, is a 5-year employer-sponsored regional visa. You can't get this in Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane, but you need an employer to sponsor you. And if an employer sponsors you, you will get permanent residency after living and working on this visa for 3 years. You don't need to work for the same employer for 3 years. After you get your sponsorship, you can work for other employers as long as you work in a regional area. Remember, you need 3 years of full-time post-qualification work experience for this visa. So let's quickly have a look at the chat, see what our audience has studied and what are you guys, what are your areas of skills. So there are project managers working as project administrators, business analysts working in their field, MBAs working in HR, studying in system analytics, bachelors but no work, plant operators. So there is a wide mix of applicants and their skilled occupations. Yes, Melbourne regional areas are included as well. So Clyde North is included. So just outside Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. So for all of you that are currently working in an occupation that you have studied in, for example, business analyst, working in areas, working as a business analyst itself, it's quite easy for you to, or not easy, but you should really be looking at talking to your employers about sponsoring you potentially on the 482 visa. So the last one is the 186 visa. The 186 visa is an employer-sponsored direct entry visa as well. Remember, this requires 3 years of full-time post-qualification work experience and an employer that is willing to sponsor you. You need IELTS as well for this one, and there are three streams, but broadly two other ones that are mainly used. One is the direct entry stream for applicants who have 3 years of full-time post-qualification work experience, and the other is the temporary resident transition stream for applicants who have already studied for 2 years in their nominated occupation. Who have already worked on a 482 visa for 2 years. Their employers can sponsor them on the 186 for a transition scheme. In order to apply for a 186 and a 494, skill assessments are mandatory. So I would highly recommend you getting a skill assessment. So we've now covered the 482 visa, the 186 visa, and the 494 visa. These are all employer-sponsored visas that lead to permanent residency. But you may tell me, oh, look, Kate, we don't have 2 years of post-qualification work experience, or we just started getting into our work experience. How can we go about this? There is another visa. If you don't meet the minimum work experience requirements, there is another visa, which is called the 407 training visa. This visa is great because you don't need to meet the minimum income threshold. So if your employer says, look, you're not qualified enough yet, I'm unwilling to pay you $70,000. You're a chef, you've only got 12 months of work experience, I can only pay you $60,000. You can look at this visa. You don't need a skill assessment for this visa, and you can apply for this visa without doing any labor market testing, which is a 4-week online advertising campaign. You don't need to do anything. You can directly apply for this visa as long as your employer is willing to sponsor you. So the visa is called a 407 training visa, and this visa basically has 3 streams. One stream is for you to obtain a registration. The registration that you need to obtain is, for example, if you're working, like let's say you're a retail pharmacist, you must have a license to work as a pharmacist. So that is an occupation that requires you to get trained for 1 year as a pharmacist under the supervision of a pharmacist. You can go for a 407 because you can't directly apply for a 482. Second option is to have occupation-based training to enhance your skill. Let's say you're a motor mechanic that's been working for the last 18 months. You are not eligible for a 482 because your 485 was only 18 months long. You can go for this 407 training to enhance your skill as a motor mechanic and thereby fill your 2 or 3 years of work experience to then transition into a 482 or 186 visa. So that's really useful as well. The last one is capacity building overseas, which I'm not going to touch on because it's mostly for foreign companies and government agencies. What you need, you don't even need IELTS. You just need functional English. So as long as you've studied a diploma course or higher in Australia for 2 years, that's enough. You need to have private health insurance. You need to be a genuine temporary entrant. So again, if you've been in Australia for 5+ years, then this visa is going to be a little tricky. And lastly, you must be sponsored by an employer who's willing to train you. So this visa is really good. You can get it for up to 2 years. And if you don't have the ability to go for a 482 or a 186 visa, I would highly recommend you looking into the 407 training visa. So here is a tip and a trick that I always give my clients to kind of go and negotiate with their employers. You can tell your employer, look, if you sponsor me, my visa is now tied to your sponsorship, which means I am giving you stability of employment, which means I will be around for the duration of my visa at least. So you can guarantee to have me. If you think I'm a good employee, if you think I'm a good worker for your company, if you sponsor me, I'll be here for at least 2 or 3 years based on my um, visa condition. So that's a really powerful thing these days because the labor market's really tight. So if you're negotiating with your employer to sponsor you, that is something that you can actually use in order to get try to convince your employer to sponsor you. Just remember that on a 407, if you have a dependent spouse, they can only work part-time. On a 482, they can work full-time anywhere, but you can only work for the employer that sponsors you. So that is very, very important for you to know as well. So one of my last slides, coming to one of my last slides, the employer sponsored process. The first thing you need to do for any of the 4 visas that I said, which is a 482, 186, 494, or 407, you must have an occupation on the skilled occupation list. Then, except for a 407, for all the other types of employer-sponsored visa, you must have at least a 2-year work visa or 2 years work experience in your nominated occupation. Third one is you must negotiate with your employer for them to agree to sponsor you. Then you must lodge the nomination application. That is where your employer nominates you as the employee for the purposes of the visa. Before they could do this, they must run what is known as a labor market test, which is a 4-week advertising process on platforms with national reach. The last step is where you lodge your visa application. It is important for me to note that you can be employed with a private company or a government agency. As long as they are willing to sponsor you, these visas are available to all employers. It's not just restricted to private companies. So for those of you that say that you are working in your nominated occupation or have worked in your nominated occupation, do you want to tell me in the chat how many years you've worked in your nominated occupation for? So we can see how many of you might be eligible for any of the visas that I just outlined. So yep, 2 years as a business analyst, that's great. You're eligible for the 482. More than 2 years, you're eligible for the 482. So those are fantastic. I'm seeing some responses in the chat. That's fantastic. Unfortunately, for you to be able to get an employer-sponsored work visa, you must have been employed and paid in your occupation. So unpaid employment is not considered sufficient. So you need to have work experience, and that would be the best way forward. Now, the last thing I want to discuss today is the skilled migration program. Unfortunately, the skilled migration program is coming to an end of sorts in the sense that the government is substantially limiting the number of nomination spots it's giving all of the state governments to be able to nominate you guys for the 190 or 491 visa. So what you need to really look at is if you have an occupation on the skilled occupation list, do you have a skill assessment? And if so, have you made an expression of interest to the federal government first for the 189 visa? And have you then registered that interest in some states for the state government for the 491 or the 190 visa? What is a skill assessment? A skill assessment is a mechanism in which you identify your skills and work experience as being similar to that of an individual who has a similar qualification and work experience in Australia. It is important to have um, uh, it is important to have a skill assessment in order to go for most of the visas that will give you permanent residency in Australia. So that is something that you need to look at. If you've not done your skill assessments, I would highly recommend you do it. So then you at least know how many years of work experience you have and whether your qualifications meets the Australian standards. So that's what I've just explained. So it's in a nutshell. We will be sharing these slides with everyone who participated in today's webinar. So don't worry about that. That brings me towards the end of my presentation. I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to answer very specific questions that applicants have asked or candidates have asked here, because I don't want to give off the cuff information. But I hope that overview has really helped, particularly the student visa changes and also the different types of employer-sponsored work visas available. I'm going to hand over to my brilliant co-host Pan, who will take you guys through the next part of our webinar, and I hope this was helpful.
Thank you so much, Keith. I should return the favor to you, calling you a brilliant, fantastic migration agent. I know that there's a lot out there. I think I'm sure all of you who are attending. First of all, welcome everyone for our webinar. And again, thank you so much, Keith, for really taking our audience through a journey, especially discussing and sharing the insights about the different employer-sponsored visa, especially the 4017 training visa, which is, I think, had a lot of insights around it on where you can navigate then and understand your eligibility around it. And then especially the quite hot news around the genuine student test, which I think most of you, some of you might know, but I'm sure that added a lot of value to you. So thanks so much, Keith, for really simplifying it to the audience and then taking them through our journey. So my job today here, everyone, is just to talk about how you can use modern job strategies to enter into the Australian job market. Now that you have a good understanding and a foundation around the migration pathway, I will be taking you through on really insightful and new modern job strategies where you can explore employer-sponsored visas, as well as enhance your ability to land a job in your own field. So starting off, as Keith touched on, the recent drop in state nomination, it really highlights the importance of finding an employer-sponsored visa in especially regional Australia, or even from your current employer. So having said that, if you go into the next slide, please. The strategies for finding in a job Australia is for based on my understanding experience, it relies on mostly on LinkedIn. So let me start off with a quick question. So this is just a icebreaker, because we are going to cover a lot of insights today about LinkedIn, and then what you can do on LinkedIn on a daily basis to really explore and improve your chances of getting a sponsorship as well as a job in your field. So how many of you have a LinkedIn profile? Pop in the chat. And then I'm hoping that I will get a yes from a lot of you. Awesome. I'm sure you do have a LinkedIn profile. So just pop in the chat how many of you have a LinkedIn profile. I see a lot of yeses. Awesome. Okay. Next up, now, if you have a LinkedIn profile, let me ask. The next slide, please. So how do you use LinkedIn daily on your job search? Now, out of the three options, you can say all three or one or two, only one. How do you use this? This is extremely important. Just to understand, this is also a reflection for you to understand how do you spend your time on LinkedIn on a daily basis. Just to apply, okay? That is one. Apply to jobs and network with people, 1 and 3. Okay, these are the same 1 and 3. That's great. 1, 2, 3, Rahul, amazing. Great to see you here, Rahul. Rahul, I have worked with Rahul, I believe. Yes. 1, 2, 3, actually. So 1 and 2. So I've seen a lot of 1 and 2s. So let me tell you now, if you are to get a result on LinkedIn, especially to focus on getting an employee sponsored visa or really to pitch to someone with a job with a sponsorship, you need to be working in all three. For those who have said just one, it's time to think of working on the other two. But don't worry, today I'm going to share a few tactics by how you can optimize your profile and then use the digital copy as a resume, as well as really using some advanced filtering techniques to improve your LinkedIn game. Let's dive into it. Now, next slide, please. Now, why LinkedIn is important? As you all know, 80% of the jobs are never advertised online. Now, for those who have said just applying online, right? Or who are using just LinkedIn as just an application platform as Seek or Indeed, just remember there is this concept called hidden job market. Most of the jobs nowadays, regardless of the industry, they're not advertised online, unfortunately. So there's a lot of things that happens in the background. So what I will show you today are a few tactics that you can approach and then get into these jobs that are not advertised online. 52 million people use LinkedIn globally, and 4 out of 5 LinkedIn people who use LinkedIn drive business decision. Now, these are the people who can say yes or no when you approach them for a sponsorship. As you know, there are surface level sponsorship jobs that I'm going to share and how to access them, but sometimes I would say most of the time these sponsorships opportunities are not visible. So how to influence these business decision makers for them to sponsor you by showcasing your value to them, right? So that is a hidden tactic, but not many people are aware of. And the other one is 44% of the hiring managers are driving LinkedIn skills that are to fill roles. Next slide, please. Thanks. Now, I believe that the image is not visible, unfortunately, but I wanted to share you how recruiters see your profile. Not sure if you can get the image running, but in that case, that is totally fine. I can open it up in a different screen. But basically, this is a way. What I want to show you here is recruiters use a different platform.
Sorry, Pan, I don't think I can get it up. Do you want to share it on yours?
That's okay. I will just mention what they can see on Recruiters Weave. So basically, what recruiters can see, they use a platform called LinkedIn Recruiter. So they are not using the same LinkedIn version as yours. So they use a paid application. So for them, if you are getting into the top search results, the recruiters will see your name, your headline, your last 3 job roles, your education. And then they will use a bunch of filtering mechanisms to decide who to contact. So let's say if any of you are not getting 3 to 5 targeted messages, headhunting messages from recruiters on a weekly basis, that means your profile is not getting up there. And then you're losing out on a lot of job opportunities, including opportunities where you can get a sponsorship. So these tactics of optimizing the LinkedIn profile will help you to get in there, but even getting in the top search results, you need to further convince them using one of the 2 important aspects of LinkedIn profile so that you get the initial profile invite. As I said, why am I sharing this? LinkedIn is not just about applying for a job. It's about making people find your profile so that you will compete, you will get these invites, messages, job offers from recruiters even without applying for it. If you get into that phase, you immediately will be in a position to pitch your skills for a sponsorship or potentially a job opportunity. Let's say if you haven't found a job offer in your field, that is the best way to land a job, not through Seek or applying through hundreds of other candidates. So optimizing your LinkedIn profile. Now, profile picture and cover banner is extremely important, as you would all know. If you're a graduate trying to break into the industry, if you still have a selfie or your graduate picture, it's time to get rid of it. Upload a professional picture because it has 21 more times likely of profile views, and then 9 more times a more connection request if you have a professional profile picture and a custom cover banner. Now, target job roles or location, you would need to update all 5 preferences, but please do a research on what are the target job roles in your industry, what you're targeting. Do not stick to just one. Let's say if you're applying for a data analyst role, make sure you understand there are other roles that you can target to get in, such as reporting analyst, insights analyst, custom analyst. But I've seen a lot of migrants in entry-level graduates are using just data analysts in this section, and there's plenty more. Now, I want to dive into the headline, which is one of the most important sections in LinkedIn profile. If we quickly go into the next slide, please, slide. So this one before. So these are the common headlines. Just raise your hands up if you have a headline similar to this. You don't have to pop in the chat. Just raise your hands up, just for me to understand out of how many of you have a headline similar to this. Awesome. So Jude has a similar headline. These are one of the common headlines. So Shahan as well. Thanks for engaging, Shahan. So data analyst at CHS. Second one is the most common one. I think 60-70% of the candidates use the second type of one because it's a bit of an enhanced version, but still, let me tell you, all these 3 headlines are not good enough to compete in today's market. So this is not an example. It is good to have some kind of a headline. So basically the first one is the default one, which I don't recommend, because just if you think as a recruiter, that doesn't help the recruiter to differentiate you as a unique candidate. So if you further enhance it to second version, but still I will show you a headline where you can really go one step further to really showcase the value that you will bring to your next role. Third one, if you're a graduate, showcase in addition to your degree what you bring to the role. So here's an example of a killer headline where I have helped hundreds of graduates, hundreds of migrants land jobs, sometimes without even applying for it. Next slide. Here's a headline that I train my clients to come up with. This is a specific formula I have tested after learning LinkedIn tactics for years. This is an example for a procurement specialist. So as you see, the first title, you start with your target job role. Let's say I've seen a lot of business analysts here, accountants here. So accounting, graduate accountant or junior business analyst, and then follow up with a couple of 2 to 3 hard skills. What are the core competencies or hard skills that are in demand for your industry? So for an example, data-driven insight, warehouse operations, and then follow up with a couple of software tools like SAP. Now, you see after supply chain management, there is a value adding statement. This makes a huge difference. So this is one of the things that I train my mentees, my clients to really optimize when they work with me. I help companies streamline procurement processes to improve cost savings and profits. Now, what would you think if you are a recruiter seeing these headlines again? Let's say, imagine you're a procurement specialist who has a headline such as procurement specialist and couple of skills plus another candidate sharing this headline. Who would you pick? Who would you click into? It's obvious, right? This headline creates a bit more curiosity for a recruiter, for a busy hiring manager to go in and check what you're talking about. If you're not convincing them at this stage, trust me, you're not getting that click or invite from a recruiter who's potentially offering a job, sometimes without advertising it on Seek. So here's a formula where you can apply to your role, but there's much more. But you can start from just understanding how you can develop a headline like this. Moving on to the next slide. About section is also another important section where you can really sell your story. Remember, everyone, this is not just a copy of your resume. I've seen a lot of migrants just copy and paste their professional summary into about section. They're saying the same thing. LinkedIn, you have to sell your skills. For an employer, a company who's not aware of what you can bring, right? They might have a budget to sponsor you, but they don't know the value that you bring in. So for them to understand what value that you bring in, you have to sell your skills. Just talking about what you are capable enough, like what your university skills are or what your passion is about, is not going to cut it off. So this is a formula that I would recommend, and I help clients to build up with. Start with the story. What made you choose your field? What's your passion behind it? Add your uniqueness, your personality, and then talk about how that passion paved the path to conduct your educational qualifications. And then if you have internships, any projects or work experience, talk about a bit in that, and then make sure you drop key quantifiable achievements in your about section. Now that is important because that's where you really seal the deal. Recruiters don't go into your work experience, so they don't even decide to call you to ask your resume if they are not convinced about this section. So if you're not talking about your key achievements in your about section, you're losing out on a lot of job offers. And then finally, if they're happy to contact you, have a call to action on where they can contact you. Here's an example of a great about section. For an example, as you would see, it is for a data analyst. I would start with a story, okay, complexity of numbers in interviewing, something that creates curiosity, right? That really captures the attention. Remember, a hook is important. Otherwise, a busy recruiter wouldn't stay in your profile if they see your profile about section is similar to hundreds of other people. And then talk about your education qualifications. If you have a capstone project in your last year, talk about it. And then work experience, and then really identify your most high impact key achievements under key achievements, right? And then closing line and a call to action. This is how to draft and develop a killer about section so you can get more results in your LinkedIn without even applying for it. Next up, now I want to take a pause and ask a question. Now that you have understood a bit of the LinkedIn profile tactics, especially one of the most important sections, about section, and then headline, give me what would you rate your LinkedIn profile on a scale of 1 to 10. I need your honest rating. One rule, you cannot say 7. Everyone says 7. That is a psychological number that everyone shares, and I want your input. Like, this reflection will help you improve your job search. I want your input on how would you rate your LinkedIn profile on a scale of 1 to 10. Rahul starts with an 8. Awesome, Rahul. That's amazing. You can do better. Thanks for your honesty, Jesse. 5, I'm sure, like, you can improve your LinkedIn profile, the branding and these results when you realize you need to improve. Jude, thanks. 5. Let's be realistic, Jude and Jesse. If you're at 5, we need to aim at not to get to 10. What about when you think of it with these tactics, if you are aiming to get into 7, 8 within few weeks or a month, you will be more focused. You'll be getting much more results from recruiters. Your profile will be seen by your potential hiring managers, where you will be able to have conversations. Where now you don't know where to go, you don't know how to have these conversations, but if you apply these strategies, you will create opportunities sometimes even without reaching out to people. So thanks to everyone for rating yourselves, and thanks to honesty. Moving on to the next slide. Now, I'm going to share a live demo now. I'm going to share a live demo on how to really use LinkedIn advanced filters to understand few tactics on really finding some jobs that are relevant for visa sponsorships. Keith, let me quickly share the screen. So first tactic is search with the term visa sponsorship. Let me share the screen, guys. So as you see in the screen, search with the term sponsorship. Let me share quickly the screen, and you will get a live demo on how to do this. I'm sharing the screen right now. Can everyone see my screen, the LinkedIn screen? All good? Just a quick thumbs up if everyone can see. Keith, can you see the screen?
Yeah, yes, Panita, it's all good. We can
All
see the
right.
screen.
So when you go to LinkedIn, you can use the term sponsorship in the search bar. So I'm going to give you an example of one of the most common sponsorship ways and how to identify sponsorship opportunities using this method. So just type in sponsorship, hit enter. Let me reload the screen. So you will get, once you search, you'll get a list of jobs that has the search term sponsorship. Now, be aware that this term can have, okay, we are not allowing visa sponsorships. That will also be captured. So you have to be mindful in clicking into the roles. You can always read and then understand it. Now, after you click jobs, you will see a bunch of job roles that has the term sponsorship. It could be visa sponsorship. Sometimes it could be the sponsorships that are not offered. So you can go into filters and then select an industry. Now, normally in engineering, as you know, if you are going through a recruiter, recruiters control the market in many fields. So how to find recruiter-based, agency-based job offers that are offering sponsorships? I will go to all filters. Technology is not my best friend today, so have patience with me. In the meantime, how many of you use the all filters before in LinkedIn? Okay, here you go. I will go to the industry and then I will search professional services. This is the category that most recruitment companies use under their company pages. I can see their 12 results comes up. Let's see if there are opportunities that offer a visa sponsorship. It's loading right now. If I quickly look through the results that comes your way, I'll find this one. Just for an example, Wood is one of the most popular engineering consultancy agencies, right? So in Perth, there is a sponsorship opportunity for a principal technical safety engineer. There's 23 applicants, 2 weeks posted. And if you write deep dive into the job description, you can see that there are sponsorship opportunities available for the suitable candidate. Now, in your normal jobs for a daily basis, a lot of you say that you're using LinkedIn just to apply for jobs. If you're not using these advanced tactics, there is a big missed opportunity for you to not understand what are the companies who are posting job offers with a sponsorship opportunity. There is an urgent need for it. So it's just about understanding this and getting into them as fast as you can. The other way, I hope that is valuable for you, and you can test it out in different industries. Use the all filters button to test your by your target job fields and everything else. And the other tactic I want to quickly share you is searching for posts by a regional location. And as Keith shared, there could be potentially employment sponsorship opportunities much higher than Melbourne City, the main cities, in the regional areas. If you search Bendigo, for an example, one of the popular towns, so I would say Bendigo plus hiring. If you search by this key term, like keyword, and if you can filter these keyword by post. Now I'm looking for posts because, as you know, if I'm a recruiter, I don't want to publish a job offer in jobs boards because I know 100 people will apply. I don't want to check 100 resumes. So instead, I will just post this as a post on my feed to see who in my network or who in my network can refer some people into it. So I will sort it by latest and I will show the results. When you scroll down, you will see there are a bunch of roles that are comes up. And if you can search by Ballarat, Bendigo, there are other roles that are comes up, which potentially might have a sponsorship opportunity because this might be quite new in your industry. And this might be something that is not advertised on Seek, Indeed, or anywhere, basically hidden, just sitting there in a hiring manager or recruiter's feed. That's the first step they do, especially if they want to get warm leads to their profile. So I want to quickly show you this. During my programs, I will cover many, many advanced tactics for you to improve your chances. I will stop sharing and I will go back to the slide deck. Thank you,
Yeah,
Keith.
Pan, you can see it?
Yes.
Perfect.
So this is what I recently shared. I will quickly go into the next slide. Thanks, Keith. So this is one of the other LinkedIn hidden pages that you can follow to get notified as soon as the 482 job opening is advertised. There's a lot of engineering related ones. It is actually based in Perth, but they do advertise other. As you see, there's over 100,000 followers. So there are, of course, many other sponsored jobs being posted actively in this site. So I would really suggest to really follow this page and then keep an eye on. If you hit the bell button on the top right, you will get notified as soon as the job posting is posted in this site. The next slide. Now, tactical approaches to employer sponsorship. This is the last part I'm going to cover. Now, Keith brought up a really great insight when he was talking about the minimum step. When you have these conversations, for those who you are already in a relevant job and you want to approach your employer, it's a good suggestion as LinkedIn, as Keith said, to approach them in a way that you will commit to them for a minimum period of 2 to 3 years so that they can have your knowledge skills. But let me ask you this question. When do you ask for a salary raise? Just put 1, 2, or 3. This is a common question that I get. I wanted to check when you normally ask for a salary raise in your job roles. 1, during your performance review. 2, when your probation ends. And 3, during your one-on-one meetings with your manager, whenever you feel like it. How do you normally approach a salary question, a salary increase request? 1 or 3? Performance review, yep. One-on-one meetings, great, Shahan. 1 and 2, Tisara, okay. When your probation ends, you approach it. Yes, it makes sense. Now, let me tell you, next screen, please. 1, during a performance review. Great, Rahul. Now, it's really important to understand the financial reporting period of your employer. Now, most Australian companies, this will be July to June. So, because the reporting period falls in July to June, companies start their budgeting process 3 to 4 months earlier. So normally, let's say if you have your performance review in December and the financial period starts in July, it's highly unlikely if they haven't budgeted a raise for you that they will give a raise for you. So if you're planning to have a performance raise in your performance review that falls in December, you need to start months earlier. And this understanding is quite important. Next slide, please. So understand the financial reporting period. Timing is really key. Initiate sponsorship conversations strategically. Strategy is key. Really understanding the budgeting timeline. If the financial year starts in July, start your conversation basically 3 to 4 months earlier, which is February 2024. Most probably, this might not be your performance evaluation. Unlike most companies do your performance evaluation in either mid-year or end of year. So even your probation might fall in this period, but you need to really understand what the company financial period is. Next up. Next slide, please, Keith. Thank you so much. And highlight when you approach this conversation, it is really important first to list down your key achievements. emphasizing the company benefits. Company wouldn't understand what you can bring to them or what value they will get if you just ask this as a request. You need to show, even if you have worked there on a probationary role, what level of achievements, how have you contributed to them in terms of their high level goals, such as revenue growth, operational efficiency, cost savings, and if you're in a marketing role, could be marketing share, engagement, social presence. You need to pitch them in that way. Okay, this is my value addition, and these are my high level, high impact achievements that will benefit for you for the next 2 years if you retain me and if you offer a sponsorship. Next slide, please. Focus on value generation, as I emphasized during negotiations. Emphasize the value you bring to the organization and quantify the cost of replacing you. Remember, companies, there is a huge cost to replace you. They have to go back to the recruiters, they have to pay big bucks, right? And the cost of training you. What is the cost for them to train a new person and get them up to the speed of your knowledge level? What is the cost for them to pay for a recruitment agency, which is probably more than 10 grand in nowadays, probably for a recruitment agency? What is the cost for them to replace you if they don't offer you the sponsorship? This is the way that you have to approach an employee sponsorship conversation. Next slide up, please. So now, based on this, let's do a bit of a reflection. This is what I want to cover today, but we will move on to, just hang on in there, because Keith and myself will be sharing how we can help all of you on your job search and also your pathway to PR. But I will start that, which is asking how confident you are to reach out to people on LinkedIn. One question, just a review, just a scale on 1 to 10, just to get a pulse from you after what we have shared today. How confident are you? Just tell me, how confident are you to reach out to a hiring manager, a recruiter on LinkedIn, just focusing on your job search? 1 to 10. Near 10, once you're ready to provide. That's great, Jesse. So I believe if you are a 5 on your LinkedIn profile, you need to get to 8 to 9. Tisara, thanks for that review. Thanks for the ranking. 7, 9, 8. Okay, awesome. I'm getting a lot of over 5s. That is awesome. That is awesome. So next up, next question will be, how confident are you to have a sponsorship conversation with a senior level executive? Now, this could be your own senior level, like own manager, or the boss of your boss. 3, okay, or someone who's a stranger, like an executive or a CEO of a construction company, executive of a technology startup, right? Who's really in a high level, senior level role, and they don't even know that they have the budget for employee sponsorship. How confident are you to approach a senior level executive? Thanks for the honest review, honest rating. I see a lot of 5, 6, a bit lower than you reaching out to hiring manager.
My details are on the screen. So is Pan's details on the screen as well. Please take note of it. We will send all of you a copy of these slides. We've also recorded this webinar. We'll edit it and post it on LinkedIn and YouTube shortly. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. If you have any questions and answers, put them in the chat. We'll hang around for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, do reach out to us and we'll be very, very happy to help you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for your time. Really a great session. And thank you so much, Keith, for organizing the webinar and adding so much value to the audience.